All right, hello everybody. Welcome to a special live edition of the Amigos podcast. We're doing an interview. If you don't know, the Amigos podcast is a weekly wacky look at an Amiga game a week. We've been doing it since 2015, and this is episode 463, I believe, 463. So there's about 10,000 Amiga games. We'll be gone before the Amiga games are gone. But today we have a very special guest, of course, Mike Dailly. Let's give him a big hand. So Mike, this is the first time we've met, and aside from knowing your various accolades, I don't really know much about you as a person, so I thought maybe, would it be okay if we talked a little bit about how you broke into the whole computer thing in the first place? So tell me about, when was the first time you ever saw a computer in your life?
Let's see. So, back in the early 80s, and I'm going to include arcade machines in this.
Sure, yeah.
A friend of mine, his father had a little cafe, and he had an arcade machine in the corner with Galaxians on it, and we used to play that all the time. So that would have been 82-ish or so, 82, 83. And then after that, the same friend got a ZX81, and I used to go around there and we used to play games on it and fiddle with BASIC. And I got hooked on it. He wasn't so much in it at the BASIC, he wanted to play games, but I wanted to make it do things. And the first thing we did was, in BASIC, we did a loop to print a row of blocks. So it was like, just along the top. Isn't that cool? Look, we made it do that. And then after that, we thought, we'll print a block and then we'll print a space to the left of it and make it go. So it was erasing itself. So all of a sudden it was a moving block. It's like, that's what games do. And so that's it. I was totally hooked. And then he upgraded to Spectrum, and my mum bought me his ZX81.
Oh, okay.
And at the time, for some reason, I had a portable in my room, which in the early 80s, and it was just unheard of. So I was able to just sit and concentrate and fiddle with this computer.
Now, looking back at it, we always think about the keyboard on the ZX81 is the only thing worse than the dead flesh. But at the time, that membrane keyboard, it didn't slow you down at all.
No, because we didn't have anything else. So you always work with what you've got, and I was too excited about making this machine do something that you'd fiddle with it. The more problematic was the RAM pack over the keyboard, because you'd be pressing it and it would shuggle and it would die and stuff, and you'd have to reload everything. So that was more of a problem than the keyboard. I don't know if my ZX81 keyboard was better than anybody else, but I never had a particular problem with it. You were just quite slow at typing, but you were learning. You weren't quick anyway.
And how did you save your progress back then? Did you have a cassette drive?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So once I got past doing just simple basic programs, I started playing with assembler, and that meant you had to load your assembler from tape. So that was a good 20 minutes to load. There was a debugger that I could load in as well into this 16K assembler debugger, but that was another 20 minutes, and I just got fed up waiting on them, basically, because every time you type and run something at crash, you have to do it all again. I can't remember saving very much on a ZX81. I don't think I ever completed enough to go, ooh, there's something, and save. But it would have been to tape again, and the ZX81 tape was just awful. So certainly once I moved up computers, I would be saving several copies. So it wasn't just save to tape, it was save it to tape 3 times, just to make sure.
And were you always coding games? Was that always your main focus back in those early days?
Yeah, because that's all we really cared about back then. Nobody really did application stuff. It was all, business stuff was boring.
What were some of the early games that you remember, some of your first games that you typed out?
Well, I didn't really put any from magazines or anything. It was just fiddling with stuff and seeing how things work. The first thing I finished was actually a database. My mum's workbench, I got a Spectrum from them to write them a database. And that was probably the first thing I ever finished. And it was just a ZX Spectrum disk drive, really nice, one of those low profile keyboards, because it was for proper typists. So they needed a keyboard that could use the rubber key thing. And they were used to using a big business computer with a Rolodex of the number that had the name and all that kind of stuff. So you would look up the name, get the number, type it in the computer. And using Spectrum Basic, I just let them type the name in and then, substring, find the name. And they were amazed you could type the name in. And I would just list all the names, there you go. I was like, how'd you do that? It's like, let's just search for the names, basic, there you go. But none of the business computers did this.
Wow.
That was astounding. And I just saved it out to disk, because they got a BBC disk drive on it. So it was such a cool Spectrum setup. But I only had it for a year, and then they took it to use it.
Oh.
So I lost that. And I was going to have to go back to my ZX81. I just couldn't bear going back to it. So I didn't do very much for about a year until Santa brought me a Commodore Plus 4.
Oh, wow. So the Commodore Plus 4 was really your first proper computer with the keyboard and everything.
It's a lovely machine. Yeah.
And what are some of your memories from using that?
That's when I really got into kind of proper coding at that point. On the Spectrum, I'd fiddled with a bit of assembler and doing some little sprite routines and stuff, but I didn't really get that far with it. I did write a platform routine on the Spectrum that, as soon as I finished it, I didn't know how it worked. It was just so complicated. So on the Plus 4, I was really getting swapped over from Z80 to 6502, and then I was starting to get into proper coding, doing main loop, making things move, and it had all the nice smooth scrolling, character map screens. So I did do a breakout game on that that I finished. It's up on a website somewhere, but it's awful. But it was great. It's basically what I started to learn my trade on effectively.
In the Plus 4 it was full color, right?
Yeah. Although I was using it on a black and white TV.
Oh. Didn't matter. Now, because you're originally from Dundee, and what was sort of the scene like at this time when you got the Plus 4? How old were you at the time?
Would have been about 15, I think, 15, 16.
And did you have a lot of friends that were also into computers at the time?
Certainly, it was just the usual thing of a school playground swapping games, but everybody was swapping Spectrum games, so I didn't swap with anybody. I would just have to go down and buy the cheap games. None of them at school were programmers. Not really. I think there was one or two. One had a BBC and stuff. But there was nothing really comparable. It was only when I got told about this computer club at the college at night, where I met the rest of the old Dave Jones, Russell Kay, Steve Hammond, where we kind of fell together into a similar group. And
there was some computer manufacturing in Dundee at the time too, wasn't there?
Yeah, Timex built the Spectrum, and I kept hearing stories about. There was so many Spectrums in Dundee because I kept falling off the back of a lorry and finding a way. I never got one like that. I was furious. Everybody seemed to get them but me. So I had my Plus 4 and then eventually upgraded to 64. And Russell was a Spectrum guy. He had loads of them. Dave worked at Timex for a while doing hardware testing. So he had a filing cabinet full of them.
Oh, wow.
And Russell used to blow them all up and he'd give them another one. They were writing a game called Moonshadow, using a Disciple disk system. But if you nudged the Disciple thing wrongly, it would fry the Spectrum. Oh. So rather than get it fixed, Dave would just hand Russell another Spectrum. So there was quite a lot of them.
And was your first commercial or your first professional job working in the software industry with those guys that would become DMA?
That was my first job, and anything else. I did go to college for like 3 months before I got kicked out for not going. But back then, that was 89. There was no comparable course, really. They were all sysadmin courses, and they expected you to have, higher English stuff, higher maths, going on to do degree maths and all this kind of stuff, and that was nonsense. You don't need any of that for game stuff. And then just all this other written stuff. So the actual programming part of it was easy, and I was getting high marks for that, but I didn't attend any of the other classes, and that doesn't stand you in good stead with them, apparently. So
turns out they don't like that.
Yeah, I was asked not to come back. So I had 3 months of not doing anything, and then Mum was trying to push me to go to get job interviews at Texas Home Care. I don't know if any of you remember that. It's like B&Q kind of thing over here. And that was my only job interview until Dave went, I might open an office. Would you like a job? Oh, yes, please. That was my interview. Would you like a job? Yes, please. And then he got the contract from Psygnosis to do a port of Ballistics from the ST onto the Commodore 64 and PC. So Russell K got the PC one, and I did the Commodore 64 one.
Oh, wow. What was that like, your first experience sort of porting down?
Slightly terrifying, particularly for that game, because there's so many moving things
There's
on
a lot
screen.
of physics involved, right? With
Yeah, and I
ballistics,
didn't understand any of it. Russell, he's just finished his... in fact, he used ballistics as his university project, which he passed, but none of his lecturers understood because it was all an assembler. But he decoded all the physics stuff. And the 64 one mostly works, but when you're playing it, you can see things just wrong. Basically, just totally wrong. But it was my foot in the door. I did a game, and it was released, so that was fine. But the initial point when Dave handed me the equations to it, which was 16 multiplies and adds to do the ball-to-ball stuff, which, like I said, I didn't understand at all. I do now, funnily enough, but then not a clue of what it was doing. And that number of calculations on the 64 alone is quite complicated, but they had 32 balls all bouncing off each other, off the kind of puck, and that number of things was just slightly terrifying.
Yeah.
But we managed to do it. So it was good. The first game is always a bit terrifying, and then after that it kind of eased up. We went on to do a port of Blood Money, which was Dave's game, and that's just a shooter. So that's what we know. So.
Now, what about when you first got into developing your own games with DMA? What was the first project that you guys took on?
I mean, the idea with DMA is I would be doing ports, so Ballistics, Blood Money, Shadow of the Beast, and Dave would be trying to do original stuff in the background. So he did Menace before the company, then Blood Money as the company was starting up. And then he tried to do some other games. We had Gore, which is a beat 'em up he was trying to do, which he had to temporarily shelve, as we called it, because he was doing it for an Amiga 500 before all the RAM upgrades, and it just didn't fit. So he shelved that. And then Walker, he started doing that and just didn't like where it was going, so he shelved that. And only after that did we then get into start playing the Lemmings, at which point it was much easier, obviously.
Yeah. So let's talk about the genesis of the Lemmings project. How did this idea come about?
As when Dave was doing Walker, he hired a guy called Scott Johnson to come and do the graphics. And this was Scott's kind of first games thing. And he started drawing them as 16 by 16 sprites for the Walker to kill. But any of you'll know, the Walker, to put it on screen, isn't going to be super large. And a 16 by 16, was coming up to almost the head. It was just way too big. So I had this discussion with him where I said he was wrong, and basically said it should be 8 by 8s. That's the kind of size you want. That's what I figured you could probably get a figure in. He said, no, you can't do that. So one lunchtime I went off and drew this little figure. I think it ended up being 10 by 8 just because it had big spiky hair on them, and showed this animation of them doing things and dying and stuff. I'm like, look, it's definitely possible. Oh, okay. But then when they were all watching it and all the different death sequences and stuff, they were all laughing away at it because they were all dying in different ways. And then Gary Timmons, who'd come on, I think, was it that month? He must have just been in the office that month because it was the first month the office had opened, and Gary came in for the first month just to look around. Then he was hired the second month, so he must have just been there fiddling. But he came in and drew a couple of more animations to kind of show off more death things. And
just obsessed with death of the Lemmings is what it is.
Well, Scotland, we're always kill something, it's fine. But it was interesting because we immediately saw it was like the Wile E. Coyote thing. You could just kill them in so many stupid ways. And it was Russell K just laughing when there's definitely a game in that somewhere. And he's also the one that called them a lemming because of the Disney thing of all queuing up to die. Yeah, so,
which I guess Disney sort of came up with that myth whole cloth, right? Yeah. So, you have this idea, and did you take it to Psygnosis immediately and say, hey, will you fund this? Or did you bring it along a little bit before?
It actually took a long time to get a demo to a point where, Russell did a demo quite quickly after it, to be honest. And it was just Lemmings walking across the screen. And that got shown to a few folk, and none of them were interested. I think Dave showed it to Psygnosis at the PCW show in London in '89. And I believe that it was the lukewarm reaction going, oh, it's okay, well, but meh, wasn't that interested in it. And nobody was able to really work on it for about a year after that. There was various projects going on, finishing stuff up. I tried to do something and then got put on another project. Same with Russell, he started doing something and was put on another project. And it was just when David finished his one, he started to kind of address it and start to do it. But it was quite a while before it was kind of, picked up and, ooh, that's interesting.
And did you have an exclusive deal with Psygnosis at that point where they would have the right of first refusal? Or
as far as I'm aware, Dave had a project of 6 games with Psygnosis, and this was just one of them. So there was 3 Lemmings games, Hired Guns, Walker, and something else that we did. But that was the kind of deal from then on. I don't know if that was started with Blood Money or something. I'm not sure. So Psygnosis were automatically going to get first refusal of anything. Yeah.
And so eventually they came around. And eventually they became enthusiastic. What do you think did something change in the demo that caused them to pay more attention to it?
I mean, once they had the demo, Dave took down like a 3-level demo to show them how it was going. And he and Ian Hetherington went out for lunch. And he says when he came back, it was on every computer in the office.
Yeah.
They were all playing it. And that's when they kind of knew they had something.
Right.
That's kind of really special.
Right. So what's it like after up until this point, DMA had been successful to some degree, but you hadn't really had. How does success, like the success you had with Lemmings, change a small software house?
I mean, it just... At that point, there was maybe, 6 or 7 of us or something. And then with the amount of money that kind of poured in from Lemmings, the studio grew to about 50 or so pretty quickly and take on lots of other projects. So it did just immediately increase the visibility of the company and obviously start churning out sequels and ports and all that kind of stuff, and just taking on loads more people. So it had a huge influence on what was going on. Yeah.
Did it change the culture at all?
Probably not at that point. Anything kind of around the 50 mark is still basically the same thing. Once you start ballooning above that, then you start getting into the corporate culture. And that was really much later on, about 95 or so, when that kind of happened.
Did you do all the ports for Lemmings in-house?
No. There's about 22 or 23 different machines it's been ported to. We did Amiga ST, ZX Spectrum, and Philips CDI in-house. All the rest were done out-house.
How does that process work? Is there a bidding process where companies come to you and they say Probe or whoever and says, well, we'll do the port for this amount of money?
Psygnosis would handle most of that.
Also, Psygnosis is in charge. Okay.
Chances are Dave and Psygnosis just said, we want a port on this. Do you want to do it? And Dave would go, nah, we'll do something else. He was more interested in the kind of next new thing, constant porting.
And so, what was the follow-up to Lemmings from DMA?
I mean, we obviously started on Lemmings 2
right
soon after. There was other projects going on at the same time. Hired Guns and so on was starting at some time.
But I mean, Hired Guns it's a fine game, but it didn't have the impact that Lemmings did.
No. I mean, it was coming just as Doom appeared, so it kind of got shot in the foot. But certainly, the Lemmings 2 was the one that was the kind of the next big one. And a lot of careful design went into that. Dave spent a long time trying to figure out how to make it a bit more easy. The biggest problem with Lemmings is if you look at the original Lemmings, it's basically 5-screen bitmap that scrolls that you just knock chunks out of or put stuff on, and that's basically what it is. So if you start taking that onto consoles that are all character maps, then you're stuffed. How they fit it on Game Boy, hats off to them. They did an amazing job.
Yeah, it's a great port.
Into it.
It really is.
So Dave thought long and hard about how to do this on consoles because the Amiga could handle anything. So he basically redesigned all the level stuff and the tech behind it so that it could go onto consoles much more easily. So there was a big design process in that. We all kind of fed in, well, we need to do this, this and this, and they've kind of pulled it all together to do that.
And was the Amiga the original platform for Lemmings?
Amiga was always the lead for these things. Once you had the tech nailed down to how it would work and that it would work on other machines, then most of the effort was put into the Amiga 1 because that was still the lead platform. And then I did the Super Nintendo one, Russell did PC, and Brian Watson did the ST.
Was it difficult to when you had to make that shift, like you say, from sort of bitmap graphics to the tile-based graphics? Did that take a lot of time?
For Lemmings, it does, because it's not really suited for that. So on the SNES, when you're doing any games, you are all tile map stuff, but they're all custom built to just make pretty looking levels, and nothing then changes on them. So, and you just put sprites over it, and you've got a game, isn't that pretty? With Lemmings, you've obviously got this very complex level put together with tiles that you could then knock chunks out of.
Everything's destructible, right?
Yeah. So it was very tricky to manage the level where you've got these original set of tiles and then you dynamically create tiles on the fly to manage all the chunks that were taken out of things. And that's why a lot of the levels in the SNES one are slightly different, why the practice mode isn't infinite, whereas on the Amiga one you could just disintegrate the level. So the Amiga one still worked with tiles, but Dave just copied the tiles to a big bitmap screen and then did whatever he did. So I still had to go and keep the tile system going, modify tiles, dynamically generate them, and manage all that. So it was quite a headache to really get around that. The rest of it, in terms of front end screens and intros, that was just tile maps. They were fine. We were kind of used to doing that. Commodore 64 upwards, they're all kind of tile map stuff. So
okay.
It's easy enough to do. We knew what we were doing with it.
So, sometimes with companies, they have a breakthrough success and then they try and put other things out and it doesn't really stick, so they end up sticking with the same formula. I'm thinking about Team 17 and Worms, for example. You end up with like Worms 6000 Crazy Golf and all these things. With DMA, that obviously didn't happen. And so I would just like to give you this opportunity to claim that you're the person with your design of Grand Theft Auto that you saved DMA from becoming the Lemmings company.
No, I would like to no. Yes, I created the GTA, but Dave's the one that's always just, I'm done with that now, we're going to do something new. So he didn't want to stick on Lemmings. Once we got to Lemmings 3, that was really just the contractual obligation game. We'll do Lemmings 3 and then that's us done with Psygnosis. Last game, we're doing something new. And it was always about doing new things. So, we were doing Uniracers in the background of that, which is obviously very different. Once we moved on to PC, you had Tactics as well. There was a couple of other games that never appeared. Clan Wars, and we had Zenith, which was an N64 game, Body Harvest. They're all just different. Dave loved different control systems, different games, and he always wanted to move on to something different. So DMA was never going to be that game that a company that just did the same thing over and over again. We always want to do something new.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Uniracers because it's one of my very favorite games on the Super Nintendo. Why was it a one and done situation?
I'm not allowed to swear on this. So the Uniracers game was great fun. And there's lots of bits in the background that you probably don't notice. So if you're playing two players and you're doing a race, and it's always quite tight.
Oh yeah.
And there's a reason for that. It's because we cheat. And once you start doing stunts, you get all the speed boosts. But if you're in the front and do them, you don't get really a speed boost. So it keeps you quite close. So there's always quite a close match. But the offshoot of it is it's a really tight, fun racing game.
Yeah.
And a lot of effort was put into making all these things go. It was all the pre-rendered stuff. There was about 10,000 frames of animation that were all kind of compressed into little sprite character blocks and stuff. So there was a lot of tech that went into that. I think the screens were 256 by 256 SNES screens in size. So that's like 65,000 pixels square that it could be.
Wow.
They were huge.
Yeah.
So a lot of them are empty because of the nature of the track, but it could cover a huge area. We had an A0 plotter that Nintendo bought us to print out these levels. So we had big things like this, and it was just this tiny little ribbon that you would see in it because they were so big. And it was such a fun game to kind of do. The team that were on it were very focused. Colin Anderson that did the music, he was just a musician. And and I did a MIDI to SNES converter thing for him, and it just didn't quite work. So he got down into the hex and was doing all his music in hex code and stuff. I didn't really know anything about it, and it came out amazingly. So it was a great team that was on it. In terms of why nothing else came out, I mean, it was Pixar who decided that every Uniracer that's digital belongs to them, and they sued. And the developer always gets the blame for these things, so the publisher just passes that on. And they compared Red's Dream, which was the unicycle, to Uniracer and went, look, exactly the same. But they'd slowed it all down and changed it, and the judge went, yes, that's exactly the same. So he basically decided that every unicycle belongs to them.
Wow.
And part of the deal to not do it was there was only one run, and Pixar got an N64 dev kit. So that was it, one run and done. So it's 300,000 copies, and that was it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's
I
such a
swore a
tragedy. Yeah. Well, so you move on past that.
Yeah.
You have some N64 games, and I mean, when you're developing for consoles as a software team, is there a different mindset than when you're developing for platforms like the Amiga?
I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, we just want to do games. So it really just depends on the scope of the game we can do. So on the Amiga, you're obviously limited by its technology and how much you can throw at it and so on. So once you get onto PC and consoles and stuff, you can throw a lot more at it. So it's really just, we would like to do this, and we can't. And when you get to PC, we'd like to do this, we can. It just, you have an idea for it and you try and pursue it as best you can. And if we were on a lesser platform, you're just like, nah, that's not going to work. So it's really all just about, we want to do this game, can we? And as you go forward in tech, more of those are possible. And I think that's same with any of these kind of games. You get to Body Harvest and stuff, and it's, we want this big open world thing. And it's like, well, you probably, you couldn't have done that a generation or so ago. We now can.
But in terms of development, the nuts and bolts of development, for a console, it's not, you're not really doing something different than when you're developing for the computers.
Certainly on N64, it did get different because everybody was using SGI machines to dev on, and you had big 3D packages because they were really the first 3D games DMA did, and they could put through a lot more. So there was a lot more effort.
That's what you spent. You
stuff.
spent the Lemmings money on all those SGI workstations. Right?
Well, we've got a deal with BMG to do 3 or 4 games. And I mean, that was millions, and that all went on dev hardware, and they got a big motion capture system that they never used. If you see that BBC report, DMA going around when GT was being made, and you see Darren punching away on this motion capture system, and he's capturing this. No, he's not. There's a reporter coming up, quick, get somebody in that motion capture system. So that's all it was. That ended up going down to Gremlin when they bought us because they would use it and we'd never used it.
Yeah. So. I asked you this question this morning. Was there a specific time that you remember when the Amiga was riding high and then you started to feel that shift where the Amiga started to fade?
And it was exactly like Stu said this morning. It's you can kind of see the tech moving off. We did get into the PlayStation stuff reasonably early in terms of offers and stuff. Sony held a dev conference in '95, and Dave and I went down to see it, and you're just blown away by it. It was the first time it was shown to the devs in the UK, and they had the dinosaur,
the Tyrannosaurus Rex,
but they also had Ridge Racer running, and you couldn't tell apart from the arcade machine, and you immediately go, this is where the future's going. It didn't take rocket science to really know that. But even before that, in '93, '94, we were already shifting to console because it was clear, from the SNES and Mega Drive times, Amiga's not going to keep up with this. It's just the techs are running away. These are arcade machines in your room now. So we'd started to shift focus a bit anyway. While we devved on the Amiga, and they were our, that's what we programmed on and everything, where we could, the actual games we could see were going to be much better on console. So we did PC Engine stuff, SNES stuff. We did have a Mega Drive dev kit. I almost did a Mega Drive game, then I got moved on to something else, which annoyed me. But yeah, it was clear quite early on that it was going to drift away from the Amiga.
Are there projects that it still kills you to this day that somebody yanked you out of that you really wish you'd finished?
Several, yes. I did start an Amiga shooter It was after Blood Money, so it would have been 89, 90. And we were doing it was like a full screen ship. So your play ship was in the middle, and it was scrolling left to right, and then we were multiplexing the sprites down. We had these beautiful animating weapons that just filled the screen. And I was really enjoying that, and it got handed over to somebody else so I could move on to Shadow of the Beast on PC Engine, which is the PC Engine I was still kind of excited, but Shadow of the Beast isn't
Yeah, so, not so good.
Yeah. But yeah, that would have been a nice one to do. There's a couple of Commodore 64 things that I had ideas for that I never got a chance to do. I never got a chance to play with the SNES properly, because I was using the CPU for everything in Lemmings. I drew all the Lemmings and software and stuff. I didn't really get to use the hardware as I'd like.
No Mode 7.
No, I didn't get to do any of that. I did do zooming Psygnosis at the start, and that was my limit of coolness. And there was a couple of demos as well. Once I'd finished Lemmings 2, I went in to do R&D stuff, and I'd done a few. That's where all the GTA prototype stuff came from. And I'd done a few other ones that were quite interesting. I had a really nice flocking system. I had an argument with this guy in the office who swore blind you couldn't do proper flocking on.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Flocking is having something follow you like birds.
Oh, okay.
So you have hundreds of things follow you around, and he was insistent you could not do that on a computer in real time. I mean, bollocks. So I went and did this wee square of being followed by hundreds of other ones. I went, you just do this. I went, oh, that, yeah, okay. Yeah, I thought you meant this mathematical way of doing it. And nobody does math stuff in games. You cheat. That's what you do. So that would have been really nice. That was turning into a game called Attack, where it was supposed to be a one-button game. So you had a joystick and a button, but the button was just going, attack! And it was a caveman dinosaur thing where you would all kind of go and try and kill dinosaurs to survive and stuff. You pick up other tribes, so your gang and flock would grow, and that got pretty far. We had evolved through from a kind of 2D forced perspective thing like Zombies Ate My Neighbours to full-on 3D dinosaurs and everything, and then it got scrapped, which is a real shame, because that would have been such a fun game to do as well.
Why is it, do you think, with the sort of level of genius that was in the UK in the 80s, that more focus wasn't put on developing arcade games?
Because they were all home computer driven. I mean, everybody had Spectrums and Commodore 64s here, so we were so into just making things for these machines. The home computer market was huge. And to be fair, if we'd done what America had done in terms of arcade machines and consoles, we would have gone pop as well, like everybody else. But we didn't notice over here, so it stood us in good stead. And gave us like generations worth of great programmers. Yeah.
It's interesting to me that it's such a different evolutionary path.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you were working in Dundee this whole time, and the company's blown up. You've got more money than you've ever had before, but you chose to stay in Dundee.
More money than we ever had. We didn't have any money.
But you chose.
Unlike Stu, we didn't get royalties.
You chose to stay though. You chose to stay where you're from.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, we were still really young at that point, so for the most part, we were, some of us were still living at home. I mean, certainly by Lemmings 2, I'd kind of had my own place and stuff, but up until that point, I was still living at home, and there was no thought of moving out. And there was decent dev pool there, because there was only us, and then another company in Glasgow, that was it. So we had the whole of Scotland to pull for. The folk would come to us to do things. So we didn't really need to think about moving.
So moving to Edinburgh or Glasgow, it wasn't something you had to do.
No. And then later on in the 90s and 2000s, once Abertay, which is our local university, they started up a games course, then there was this influx of talent. So they would go there and populate the game studios or start their own studios up. Which is why Dundee's got such a high number of game studios in them, because Abertay keeps spitting out all these really good devs.
The system's working.
The system's working. Took a long time to get going, but the system's working.
Yeah. So let's talk about GTA.
Yes.
Did you have any inkling at the very beginning that this was going to become what it is today?
You never do. So GTA, like I said, started out as an R&D project, and it went through a couple of iterations. Started off as an isometric pure isometric thing. And then once I'd done that, I thought that was a bit boring because everybody done isometric games. What if it spun? That would be quite cool. So I made a spinning one. And they actually started to team up to do that. And it would have been along the lines of Syndicate Wars style thing, kind of spinning. But it looked very pretty. And then after that, I just thought, well, couldn't we do it top down? That might be interesting. So I was looking at Clockwork Knight, and I took the tech for that and just did these 3D platforms.
Clockwork Knight on the Saturn?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, if you think of Clockwork Knight, it's basically a side-on platformer. So you take those platforms, which is basically a square at the front that doesn't scale, and then a bit at the top that just kind of skews, what we call doom walls. So that way and that way. So the line of there just moves, and it kind of skews down. That's basically what doom walls are. And I was really interested in that, and could I make a PC do that? So I did these little platforms that moved. I was like, oh, very interesting. I could put that into that isometric thing that I had, which was basically a big grid of points. So I viewed them top down instead of isometric, just so I can get that perspective view. And I showed that to a couple of guys. Right, that's very interesting. But you know what Dave's we've been trying to get a racing game past Dave for years. Racing game, that's interesting. Oh, if I just put a wall in the background, then paint roads on it, and all of a sudden it's not side on, it's top down. So I did that, put a car on it, and then I kind of showed Dave, oh, racing game. Right. It's interesting, but not racing. Dave's always like this open world thing. If you think of Lemmings, it's actually an open world. Because there's just the level, there's the skills, go and do what you want.
You're right.
And you just have to figure out how to get across. And so it was the same thing with GTA. He had this thing that it was a very confined view space, and he could put like a city in there and have it alive and do things in it. And unlike what a lot of folks say, oh, GTA would be much better if it was 3D from the start and all this kind of thing. Back in '95, if you'd done a 3D GTA, you'd have two people in a fog distance of like 100 meters, and that'd be it.
Yeah.
It just
a lot of fog.
Yeah, a lot of fog.
Yeah.
Just wouldn't have been the same. But top down, you could have this really busy city.
You feel like it's an alive world.
Yeah. So it was absolutely the right kind of engine for its time. And we were all arcade folk, so the top-down thing is an arcade game rather than this kind of RPG type thing that's kind of...
More like a gauntlet or something like that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is why you have the kind of score in the original GTA where you run over folk and you get the bonuses and the Garanga thing. It all came from this. It's an arcade game, really. So it all evolved out of that. But as we were making it, we were just doing stuff that we thought, oh, it'd be cool if, you run somebody over. Wouldn't it be cool if the ambulance came there? Like one of the team had said, oh yeah, that'd be cool. Let's put that in. And somebody else in the team went, could I steal the ambulance? Ooh, yeah, let's do that. There you go. And then you had that with, the other cars, and there's a tank in there or something. I just want to steal that. What about the train? What are you going to do with the train? I just want to go forward and back. Okay, fine. So they put all that kind of stuff in, and it was all team driven. But at no point did you think this is going to take over the world, because a lot of the time BMG were trying to kill it because it just wasn't quite hanging together. But there was just lots of fun bits in it. So there was just constant arguments, I believe, from the production to keep it alive to the point where it was just kind of clicked and went, okay, now it's something really.
And so when that came out, was that, at what point did DMA just really become huge as far as a corporation goes?
It was before that, because we obviously got the investment from B&G, and we went from about 50 folk to about 130 or so to make the games. So there was a couple of
it was the BMG contract that really was the catalyst. Okay.
Yeah, so there was 2 N64 games and 3 PC games that went on. The Tactics came out. Clan Wars, that would have been castles and Scotch clans and stuff fighting against each other, that got killed off, probably because there was nobody on the project most of the time. It didn't progress very far, but it was a really nice concept, and it was that kind of influx of money to make them that set it going. But it was also the thing that killed DMA, because we had these people and certain projects weren't getting the attention they were needed. So you had that kind of spiral of too much going on here and the kind of debt starting to build up and so on.
Can you kind of chronicle the timeline of the transition between DMA and Rockstar?
So you would have had, just after GTA, you would have had Gremlin coming in to buy DMA for £1 plus all its debt, which I believe was a couple of million. and we were at Gremlin for a couple of years. I left in '99, just before GTA 2 came out, but I'd been working on the engine. I did the engine for GTA 2, and that was still coming out through Gremlin and stuff as well. It was fine. And then once I'd left, Gremlin said they didn't really want GTA. Big mistake.
Big mistake.
Though, to be fair, I'll get into that in a second. So they didn't want it, but Rockstar or Take-Two were desperate for it. So they did this deal to buy the GTA IP and then tried to get all the devs to go with them, whereas Dave was trying to pull them to something else. So some of them broke off, went to Edinburgh. That was the Silicon Valley team. Les Benzies and Ober and Adam Fowler and stuff, they all went to Edinburgh. And then a whole load of other ones went to Dave's thing that was in Dundee. His name escapes me for the moment. And GTA became what it was because of the Silicon Valley team. They were much more into this. You look back at Silicon Valley, they've got all these cutscenes and little movies and stuff. That's what GTA is. It's just all these little sequences and things. And the PS2 and everything came out at the right time. So all of a sudden, it was possible to do a 3D one. Although even if you look back now, there's not very much there in the original. You know, there's a few things driving about and a couple of peds, but it's nothing like the original GTA. But it's still, it was that point where it was just about possible, and they did amazing things getting that out. But it's totally different direction from what I thought it would have gone. But they're the ones that really made it balloon and take off.
Now, is there, after you left DMA, or Gremlin, or whatever, in 1999, give us 99 to now.
Oh, okay.
Sum up the last 24 years in 1 minute, please.
I went on to do mobile phone stuff. No, I didn't. I missed out Visual Sciences again. I went from DMA to Visual Sciences. We did F1 games for EA. So we did PlayStation 1 F1 game, and then we did a PlayStation. We were going to do PS2. They did that. We then did an Xbox instead. In between that, I did a PlayStation 1 dev kit, which was great fun. I was hacking the dev kit. It was so much fun. I got really peed off with EA, so I left after a couple of years and went to work at a mobile phone game studio. We did a whole load of mobile phone games for 3 Telecom when they were launching. It was Hutchison Telecom at the time. They're now 3 Mobile. And we did a big stack of games because they were the first ones to do downloadable games and downloadable content stuff. We did a big stack of retro style games, shooters, golf games, pinball games, all that kind of stuff. That was great fun. We did a Beano racing game that was DC Thompson's in Dundee that the guy that ran the place was really friendly with. So they did that, which is like a Mario Kart game, which was good fun. I then moved to Real Time Worlds because they were going to go back to do mobile phone games. And at the time, all the mobile phones porting was just making screens ever so slightly different and laying everything out again. Nightmare. So I got fed up with that. I thought I'm going to go somewhere else. Dave Jones started up this company to do GIS games, which is taking 2D map data and making it a 3D world. He started it, about 12 folk from DMA went with him to try and do this, and they didn't quite manage it. So when I was leaving, he got me to have another go, and I came out a slightly different direction, and I managed to make like a 3D map of Dundee, all kind of spinning and stuff. We showed it to Ordnance Survey and a few other folk, and I got all excited, and we got lots of map data from them. So basically we managed to make a 3D world of the UK that you could fly over and stuff. You'd be able to click on a building, edit the building like a 3D Wikipedia kind of thing, and go, oh, it's my house, I'm going to model my house. So if you think of SketchUp, but inside this model thing, then the idea was that you put a game in, so Metropolitan Street Racer or something like that, where you run through real cities. Yeah. We've already made the world, you just put your game in. But the interesting part of it was you didn't just put one game in, you'd put games in. So you're going to be playing a fishing game out in this pond, and all of a sudden you see a racing game go past. They were all interactive, supposedly. So the demos that I did for that were shown around whole investors. They've got something like 80 million in investment for this, which was great. And then he spent it all on APB, and that didn't go so well.
No.
So when that was happening, we went through a couple of iterations. Loads of folk that were brought into the project that didn't know what they were doing, and there was a big battle of like red team, blue team, and the blue team went, "Oh, sod this, I'm off," and just left the red team having meetings all the time. So I left about 2010 to go and work with a company called Yo-Yo Games, who make Game Maker. At the time, it was still very much a very niche indie kind of thing that some people would use. We took it from that and then put the games on consoles. We started with PSP and then went iPhone, Android, PS4, Xbox, all this kind of stuff. And we basically made them a tool that they could write the games in this and then publish it everywhere. And I was there for about 10 years. We did Game Maker Studio 2. That's a much more flexible platform. And just ported it all over the place. I then left. I took a voluntary redundancy there. Playtech were downsizing. They'd bought Yo-Yo in 2015 for some reason, which we never found out why. And then they were having the whole Playtech company, which was massive, were having a little downsizing. So they were just picking folk to take redundancy. So I took redundancy from them, and I went to do my own little thing for a couple of years. And then the pandemic stuff all kicked off. And Sumo Digital in Sheffield were looking for folk. And the stuff they were doing was quite interesting. So I joined them in 2021. And I've been there ever since.
All right. Oh, yeah, you did a great job summing up the last 24 years. I know it's a lot to do. I've got one more question before we open up the floor. You know, I'm from West Virginia, and the most famous Scot in West Virginia is Jockey Wilson. He's our kind of people. And so, do you have any Jockey Wilson stories? Did you ever meet him?
No.
No. I have to ask everybody from Scotland that I meet, just in case, because I'd love to take a nugget home.
I'm going to go to America one time and go, I met an American guy. Do you know him? No.
No. The floor is open. If you have a question for Mike Dailly, please raise your hand. We'd love to hear it. Come on up. Rob.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait for the mic.
Where are we? Hi there. Yeah, I was a big fan of GTA 1 when it first came out.
It's the best one.
It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So just to really, I'm sure you've answered this multiple times, but why Hare Krishnas? And what was going on there?
Okay, so that's actually quite interesting. So Colin Anderson, if you remember from Uniracers, the musician guy, he was head of the music department by this point, and they were doing all the music tracks and all this kind of stuff. And we were just in town one lunchtime, having a walk through, and there was these Hare Krishnas walking through. We hadn't seen them before, we've never seen them since. He was walking through, singing a little song. So Colin's always got a tape recorder on him. So we just walked behind them as he recorded them. And then it went in to have Hare Krishnas going in the game. And like I say, the number of things that went in, because would it be cool if somebody went, just run the thing and get a bonus? And that's where it came from. Because we're like that.
That was genius.
Oh, right. Oh, lots of people. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Hi. We all know of kind of 8 and 16-bit developers that struggled with that new generation that you were describing earlier, the transition to 32-bit and polygonal graphics. Why do you think DMA was able to succeed in transitioning where others weren't able to?
We did have a lot of graduates come out and join DMA, so we did have actual people that could do maths. Unlike me, I kind of trained on the job. We also hired an ex-Marconi simulator guy, so he used to make simulators. And we get all these stories about him. He made this ship simulator and used to get seasick on it. So he'd be on this platform that was moving and he used to get ill on it. But he knew stuff, so those of us that didn't know the maths in it, he helped take us through it. And it wasn't a big step. We did all the kind of basic stuff, and triangle rendering, all that kind of stuff we all knew. It was the organizational stuff and math stuff that we kind of needed. And we got help from that. And like I say, a lot of the other guys were proper degree folks who knew maths. So we had a bit there. The artists, like Stu was saying, we did have problems with artists. So they were kind of given tasks to do, and there was a culling of folk that just couldn't make the transition. There wasn't any coders, I don't think, that didn't. No, but certainly the artists that couldn't make the switch. Most of the coders at that time were very technical anyway, because you had to be. So it was just the maths part, and as long as we got a little help with that, we were fine. But yeah, certainly the art was a bit more brutal.
Hi there. My question is a bit more modern. So, in a way, you've been a developer for so many years, and you witnessed the evolution of development in per se.
He's calling me old, do you notice that?
So,
You're calling me old, I notice that.
Well,
I think about me.
well preserved.
Well preserved. I'll go with well preserved. Mahogany. Yes.
apologies. What I want to ask is, by witnessing all these evolutions that you've been through, have you ever wanted or had the impression, this is something really interesting that I've learned that's new, and I would like to maybe apply that to an Amiga thing, an Amiga game or an Amiga software?
Yeah.
And has that ever happened to you? And if it has it ever triggered the passion and the drive to go back to doing something else for an old platform?
All the time. Almost every day of the week. Interestingly, when I was doing the initial part when hardware rendering came in and 3D effects level, where you'd have to manage all your own texture stuff. You didn't upload textures and have DirectX do everything. You had to do everything yourself. So you had to have texture caching in there. And GTA 1, the 3D effects version of that, I did this texture caching system where it would keep the most used in memory and then swap others out. And that triggered a thing of, what if I used that on a Commodore Plus 4 for doing sprite rotations? Because in the past, you would have to rotate every sprite to draw them on the screen. And that rotating takes forever. It's like, well, what if I just cached that? So I took my texture caching knowledge back, and I've got a shooter that I'm still writing from 1999 on the Plus 4 that has 10 software sprites all moving back, which was unheard of on the Plus 4. All masked, they look like normal sprites with a full screen scrolling, and it was really nice. The idea was I was going to do a tiny little game and release it into the wild for the Plus 4 community to use. But somebody said, no, do a shooter. Oh, okay. And it was never finished. But it happens all the time. I also came up the other way. By doing that shooter, I was needing to allocate stacks of bullets. In the old days, you would look through looking for a slot to say, that's a free one, I can use that. Loop through. So, but that loop takes forever. So you could go and do linked lists, which is what we do in the modern day, where you have them all there and the free ones at the start, and put it, we'll use that one. But the link management and Plus 4 stuff is a nightmare, it's dead slow. So what I came up with was using what I've called stack allocation, where I have a software stack and I push them onto the stack, which means allocating a thing is just like a single instruction almost to pop it off the stack and use it. And I actually did an article in Game Programming Gems 8 about this new way of allocating. So there's modern articles out because I work on retro stuff as well. The back and forward I find fascinating because I'm always bringing stuff from one way and then taking stuff the other way. Retro machines, which is why I'm here, I love them because they're so hard to code for well that you can bring stuff forward and stuff you learn. Because modern PCs and stuff don't have anything like that. Take as long as you want. You'll never notice. They're so fast. But Plus 4 running at 1 and a bit megahertz. You've really got to think what you're doing. These days I'm doing Spectrum Next stuff, and it's faster, but it's the same thing. You can't just spend your time in a loop. So you've got to think of other ways of doing it. So we're forever bringing stuff back to go, well, these days I could do this. I can use a C# program to generate all this code for me that I could never have done back in the day. I did a Wolfenstein engine on the Spectrum Next, and instead of having, which is what we did on the PC, a smart loop that did scaling of walls, I generated like 384K of Z80 code in C# with all the individual routines that would scale a wall to specific sizes, and then I just call it. And it's tied exactly to what it needed. And you wouldn't have thought about that back in the days. So all the time, and that's what I love about it. Machine tech goes from slow to fast, and you can use the tech both ways. It's what keeps the games industry interesting.
All right, we got time for one more question before we shut it down. Right up here in the front, red shirt.
Thanks. I just wanted to quickly move from Hare Krishnas to Elvis impersonators. So when the time came to make an expansion of GTA to be set in an actual city in Britain, why give the job to a company, where is it, in Canada? Would TMA not have done it?
When was that? No, we probably moved on to GTA 2 or something by that point. So we didn't. The actual devs didn't really find out about it until quite late. So again, it was probably something that Psygnosis said we want to do, and they've passed on, and we just didn't really find out until all of a sudden GTA London. We did find out that somebody was doing it because they were using all the tech, and the splines for all the roads were hardwired to the driving side, and they had a nightmare flipping them over, so it was driving on the other side of the road. But aside from that, we didn't really find out until it was well underway. So I'm just assuming Dave passed on it and went, well, we're doing something new.
All right, well, let's give a big hand to Mike Dailly. Thank you so much, Mike. Don't forget to mention the raffle. Yeah. Okay, go for it, Ravi.
Yeah, so we've got a raffle going on as well downstairs, and we're going to be having that on tomorrow. But I'd also like to thank Joe Shorter as well. You've done a great job as a host.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amigos is made possible by contributions from listeners like you. Patreon supporters help choose the games we play, receive exclusive magnets, and get access to the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord server. Visit patreon.com/AmigosPodcast if you'd like to support the show and join our community.